Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Doom Patrol. It is the mid-season finale, I guess you could say. It's the last episode of part one. It was called Hope Patrol. Unfortunately, we don't have a date yet for when part two is going to debut, which is annoying. But anyway, as this episode begins, Jane wakes up from a dream in the back of Cliff's car, thinking that the events of last week were the dream. But Cliff is there and he explains that it wasn't. He also points out that she seems to have lost her longevity and is aging. She, of course, is freaking out, but Cliff can't be bothered to do anything but work on his car. As he goes back to doing so, the oven mitt that he's got on his hand comes alive and starts talking to him, claiming to be his grandson, or at least he seems to think that it has. Meanwhile, Vic is on his way back to the mansion courtesy of his friend driving him. Now, last week I had said that he had visited his brother. It was his friend. I was confused. Anyway, his friend is now driving him back to the mansion, and he has, of course, gone back to his normal age, as has Jane, by the way. Speaking of Jane, she goes to the underground looking for Kay to make sure she's all right, only to find that all of the personalities are busy doing an individual puzzle that Kay has given each of them. We then join Rita and Madame Rouge, who have also gone back to their normal ages, and they resolve to go back to the Bureau to try to find out how the IMORTUS project got going again. And Rouge even tells Rita she can have the leadership role back because Rouge never really wanted it anyway. We then join Larry, who finds himself in some kind of a weird evil forest in a pocket dimension called Orquith, after he gets sucked into it at the end of last week's episode. And he's being led by entities called Scissormen at giant scissor blade point. They're holding them at his neck, only to have Mr. 104 rescue him. So the two of them resolve to team up to stop IMORTUS, but still make it possible for Mr. 104 to not go all explodey, which I thought they had done at the end of the previous episode already, before cutting their way back to Earth. Cliff's oven mitt, aka Rory, accuses him of not really caring about Rory, saying that if he did, he'd already be on a bus to Florida instead of dicking around with the car. When Cliff protests that he's not working on the car instead in order to use it as a way to control his fear, which is just what his father did, when Rory accuses him of this, Rory takes him to see the butt in the fridge that he was supposed to destroy but didn't, as proof that he is a good person and that he doesn't need to go down the same path that his father did. We cut back to Jane, and we see that she's gone to visit the puzzle piece lady in the bakery shop. And it's clear that they both want each other and they almost smooch. But Jane stops herself at the last second. And when the puzzle piece lady suggests that maybe she needs some professional help, she says she doesn't have time for that. But she's clearly frustrated that, as she puts it, everything is always a battle. So she returns to her room at the house and seemingly starts trying to once again put the puzzle together. When Larry shows up at the house with Mr. 104, much to Cliff's dismay, because he doesn't trust Mr. 104, Larry explains that he has an accord with him, and Cliff senses that maybe they dig each other, which Larry denies, but which Mr. 4 kind of acknowledges. But then Larry gets sucked back into the pocket dimension, which somehow blasts Cliff across the kitchen. Rita and Madame Rouge infiltrate the Bureau in disguise, Madame Rouge as a cranky old janitor and Rita squished into a janitor's bucket of water. While looking for all the old material on Project IMORTUS, they find that it's missing and that it was last checked out of the project library in 1955, which prompts Rita to feel as though the whole thing is her fault because she realizes that the last person who checked it out was Wally, who is the guy that Rita was with who died. Back to the mansion, Vic returns with his friend and sees the pocket dimension entrance and has it explained to him by Cliff that Larry's in trouble, so he goes through the portal after telling his friend to go home, but his friend jumps through after him anyway, after which the portal closes. Madame Rouge and Rita go to Wally's cell at the Bureau looking for clues about the IMORTUS project. There, Rita finds a drawing of Malcolm on a wall of a ton of crazy drawings and scrawlings, and then at the back of the room, they seem to find Wally behind a prison door. We then find out that Jane wasn't really going to work on the puzzle, and she just laid down on her bed and covered herself all the way up in wallow mode. Cliff pays her a visit to apologize for giving her a hard time before, explaining that what he really wants to do is be there for the people that he loves, prompting Jane to say that she doesn't know if she deserves to be loved, at which point Cliff takes off his glove and offers her her hand, which she tearfully takes when he tells her that if people want to love her, they're going to love her and there's nothing she can do about it. After which they both agree to go after the bad guys, after which they find a pretty messed up wallaby in the hall. Now, I really liked the scenes between Jane and the puzzle lady girl. If I can go back to that for a second, it was very well acted, and you could really feel the emotion there. And you really just feel bad for Jane that she doesn't feel like she can commit and go for it, even though you know she really, really wants to, and that the other lady really wants her to. And then, as a companion piece to that scene, is the scene between her and Cliff, which I thought was really emotional, where, you know, he said he wasn't going to take off the glove for anything but his grandson, but then he realizes he has to make an actual connection with Jane because he does love her and he just wanted to be there for her. And so he offered her the chance to be like the first person he touched. And I think he also wanted to feel the feedback from her, to know that she knew that he loves her. And there was a very powerful moment, and she, you know, was very tearful. And I thought it was a really great scene between the two of them. I really like the Jane character a lot. She's my favorite character on the show. Anyway, Wallaby explains that there was a battle with the bad guys, which resulted in Bunbury being reduced to a tiny ball of fur, which is kind of funny. Over in the pocket dimension, Vic's friend discovers that there are ways to use the environment to their advantage, and he extracts a pen and a paper from a flower that was made out of them, and then draws a butterfly, which comes to life, prompting him to say that he thinks he knows how they can get past the scissor men guarding the building that they want to get into in order to free Larry. Back at the bureau, the ladies free Wally from his cell, but he looks like crap, and it causes Rita to lose control of her form and flood into his cell and envelop him. Back in the pocket dimension, Larry's about to have his longevity taken, at which point Keeg seems to show him a future where he's attacked in the house by butts, but then finds himself flying in space right into the sun. Somehow he reasons that if instead of resisting having his longevity taken as he had been and surrenders it, it will help prevent whatever future event caused he and Keeg to become separated, which I guess is what Keeg was showing him the results of. Back in the pocket dimension, Vic and his friend draw a kind of 6-foot tall version of Mr. Invincible, their little robot toy that they made in robotics back in school, and it becomes real, at which point they send him after the scissor people. Rita regains her form and realizes that she smushed Larry, much to her dismay, and then the intruder alarm goes off. It turns out that Mr. Invincible can't really do anything and turns back into paper, just as Cliff and Jane show up, Cliff sporting a mini keg over the oven mitt, just as Vic and his friend find themselves at Giant Scissor Point. At that moment, Wally emerges from the building there in the pocket dimension and is apparently IMORTUS, and he manages to get both Jane and Cliff at Scissor Point as well. We then learn that Cliff didn't close the freezer all the way when he was looking at the zombie butt, and it escapes. At which point the episode and part 1 of season 4 ends. So I did like this episode better than other episodes. I like the stuff between Cliff and Jane. I like the stuff between Jane and the puzzle piece lady. I really like the stuff between Rita and Rouge, because after last week's reconciliation, it really seemed like they're okay now, which I think is awesome, because I really like the Madame Rouge character. She's probably my favorite character of the last 2 seasons, although of the core group, Jane is my favorite character. Anyway, I really like the Madame Rouge character. I really like that she's a good person, and I really wanted her and Rita to make up, and they have now, and they're working together, and they care about each other again, and I really enjoy that. And, you know, the stakes are getting higher, right? Because now who still has their longevity? Just Vic, right? And Robot Man, but he's just a brain, so I don't know if that makes a difference. So the stakes are getting higher, like I said, and now in the IMORTUS plot, and the butt escaped, so we got to see what's going to happen there, because there's still the other butt that the lady is keeping. So I thought it was an interesting place to end part 1. I'm a little dismayed that Dorothy still hasn't shown up at the mansion. Like, is she taking the super long road? I mean, apparently she's going to play a role in part two, but like, why are they dragging their feet, bringing her into the story? She's a good character, and I want to see how Space Case is going to be involved. It should be funny. So yeah, that's really it. I thought this was a better episode than the last few. Although that said, I still don't give a shit about Vic. Still don't give a shit. Can't stand the character. And to be honest, I don't really give a shit about Larry. Don't really give a shit. So I don't know. If they lost those two characters, it wouldn't bother me. But I still like the episode overall, and I'm looking forward to part two of season 4 when it arrives. But that's it for now. I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.